sure it stays on your finger or in your pocket because I don't want to keep hearing the noise. So make sure you choose your fiddle assessment. When you have to choose it by, Chris. Yes, so make sure you choose which one. 10 or 51. Alright, I read through both of them already. I think one of them is a lot easier than the other one. So that's
which one?
I'm not counting you.
Oh, come on!
So remember, 500 to 600 words, don't do that because it shakes my screen. So 500 to 600 words, 8 paragraphs from your introduction, complete statement, body, conclusion, quotations from the Federalist paper. And again, I read through both of them. You shouldn't have to cite any other sources because it should be pretty obvious once you read through it. Oh, I know what they're talking about. So you shouldn't have to go online and get a specific citation to talk about the type of government that the document is referencing. So again, just choose one. No, you don't have to present it. This one is not like an editorial, but keep in mind, some of you, your major points for your editorial grade has been presentation. So if you've been struggling with the writing portion, make sure you get help. Ethan? Is there a question?
I said you better get help.
Yeah, so sure to raise your hand before you start talking, that's the way I can focus on you. Alright, so again, standard format, we talked through all this yesterday. Last thing, so you have to choose which federal paper you're going to write by Friday. The first draft will be due, not this coming Monday, but it's the next Monday. So you have 2 weekends to work on it. So 2 weekends. So I'm giving you 2 weekends to be able to function. Also, if you notice from this morning with the homework announcements, next Friday is a half day. So you basically have like 2.5 days next week to work on it. So if you want to procrastinate, okay, but make sure that you're thinking it through because the final draft will probably be due a week after the first draft. So if you think, I have tons of time after the first draft, no you don't. So make sure you're planning your time appropriately and wisely. Alright, anyone have any questions about this before we move on? Okay.
We leave a little bit of time in class because I won't have time to study all the reading.
Read that. You have time after school and you didn't have homework yesterday and I told you to read it yesterday.
We didn't have time to work in English, that's what I think.
I think I remember you sitting there in study hall and I believe I told you to go get the
Because it
book.
has something to do with math.
Because that's one reason why you should do it then. If you didn't do it yesterday during study hall and if you didn't do it last night, that's on you. You need to do it. Alright. We also need to work in your next memorized portion. Alright, what are you memorizing?
The precedents.
Not yet.
The preamble.
The preamble. So
Preamble to the Constitution.
Technically, yes. Alright, so
Well,
if you
you know
need
what?
the pages in your book, flip over.
Careful.
Alright, so raise your hand. Slow down. Turn over to page 136. You need it. Alright, we're gonna watch the video.
What is it?
Because I like it. You can sing along with it now. Now, keep in mind, I'm
The
gonna
preamble?
pause. Hey, raise your hand.
The preamble?
Raise your hand. I didn't call you. Alright, so for this one, I'm probably gonna pause it throughout because they did a good job trying to incorporate a lot of good ideas and references to stuff during the video. So I'll probably pause it. For this first time, let's not sing along with it just because I'm gonna be pausing over and over again, so it'll mess you up and it'll slow you down. There's also, I have one major grievance against the Schoolhouse Rock version. So again, Jamie and Quentin and Brecken. So whenever we watch it, I don't know how good it's gonna come through because we're watching a video. So if you want to find it on YouTube, you can find it on YouTube as well. Alright, someone raise your hand a minute ago. Okay.
Yeah, do you know these states and capitals law?
There's one, but because to make it easier, I just divided in alphabetical order for your quizzes. There's not a lot of list of alphabetical ones. Let's kind of do them in
Like,
chronological.
you know what I'm talking about?
I know there's a couple different ones, but I don't know like which one's off my head.
It's like the math side is like kind of like a mouse or maybe. Anyways, yeah, they speak so fast and it's hard to understand.
In this one? Okay, like I said, we're gonna pause it and talk through it.
Are we
This
going to
don't.
do it again, like all the way through after?
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know about the whole thing because they say, like, they explain what the preamble is and they don't need to know that part. So we'll probably watch the preamble part where they're actually quoting it. We'll probably watch that part a couple times. Okay.
Is there like, are you gonna do the same thing with the presidents you did with the states and capitals, like send us games, and is there a song?
There is a song for the president. So
Thank
you
God.
learn the president's song. And it's just, okay, Ethan, are you using it correctly?
I said thank God.
Okay, just make sure. Alright, so there is a song now, the president. Thankfully in the song is just last name. Do not first and last name because there's a couple of duplicate last names.
Wait.
But the song is at least like Washington, Adams, Jefferson, so it's like that where it's really fast.
So, do we have to write both names? First,
If
first.
there is a duplicate, like there's multiple Adams, there's multiple Roosevelts. So because of that, you need to have which one is which. So there's Theodore and like Franklin. So I mean, that's pretty right. But I mean, there's only one Washington, so it's understood which Washington we're talking about. So I mean, so just watch for those, and that's it. Alright, so I'm not talking during the song the first time, but again, I'm going to be pausing it, and we're going to explain the things. But there's several things I like about it, but there's one particular grievance that I have against the song. Yes.
Are we gonna have to do a couple punctuation?
No. There's punctuation for me? No. You don't worry about the capitalization and punctuation,
Thank
but
God.
you better know the
Just
words.
know the words.
I
Okay,
said thank.
okay, let's get a little bit much now. Be careful. Alright, yeah, I'm drinking in. No. Alright, seriously, there is a lot of talking out of turn. Now I have to move, so make sure, as a general rule, because I've warned I think everyone in the class at least once now, that you raise your hand before you keep talking me out for it.
Hey, do you know about the USA? Do you know about the government? Can you tell me about the Constitution? Hey, learn about the USA. In 1787, untold our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just starting out a brand new country, and so our people spelled it out, the things that we should be. And they put those principles down on paper and called it the Constitution, and it's been helping us run our country ever since then. The first part of the Constitution is called the Preamble and tells what those founding fathers set out to do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare at hand, secure the blessings of liberty, to ourselves and our posterity do ordain.
Alright, as a side note, so again, this is a good point I'm coming up to it. Why do you think, besides the fact that, like, she was underage, why couldn't she cast her ballot or her vote? Alright, raise your hand.
She wasn't 18.
She wasn't what?
18.
Okay, besides that.
The little girl that was trying to.
Oh yeah, besides that, what was the other problem?
She's small.
No.
She's small.
No.
Too little.
She's a
No.
girl.
Girls could not vote in this time period. Now, if you'll notice,
Dang.
if you notice, they did have an African American man on the jury. African Americans could vote as long as they were freemen. It wasn't like every single African American was a slave. A lot of people have that mindset of, if you were African American in this time period, you were a slave. No, there were several freemen as well for it. So it wasn't like it was just all or one. So you could still have a free African American. If he was a freeman and owned property, he could vote. So, but girls could not vote yet. So again, they're just including kind of like minor details in the song. So again, they're not pointing it out, they're just kind of referencing it. Alright, quick question, Ethan, quick question, Chris.
They but in those time periods, people like that weren't really liked. They didn't
They weren't really what?
liked. They didn't. They didn't like
weren't.
them.
I think that, I'm not sure where you're getting that part from it, but again, in America, as long as you were a freeman and you owned property, you could vote.
I know,
Now, keep in
but-
mind, in the South in particular, unfortunately, they were leaning more
That's
and
what I
more
mean.
towards slavery. But again, in the North and in the South, there was a where you could be a freeman. But again, just because so many of the others, it became kind of like an assumed thing, but not really. Even during the Civil War, there were people that would claim that an African American person was a slave and tried to bring them to the South for slavery, and that person had never been a slave. They just assumed because of African American heritage. Okay, does that answer your question? Or another one?
No. So, but there wasn't a black man to sign the Declaration of Independence or the Confederation or the Confederation.
At this
Or
time
the
period, no, but he was on the jury.
Or the Constitution.
Or on the jury. So that's what I was referencing for. But no, now keep in mind, most of the people in the United States this time period were of European descent. So that's why there's not just a whole lot. So it wasn't like that they weren't around. There were people that helped out George Washington that were African American. Your book just didn't have time to point them out because, again, your book's just so massive already, and it can't focus on every single person. But there were people advisors to George Washington who were African American. All right.
We had established this Constitution for the United States of America. In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers all sat down and wrote a list of principles that's known the world around. The USA was just starting out a brand new country, and so our people spelled it out. They wanted a land of liberty, and the preamble goes like this. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty. To ourselves and our posterity, to ordain establishes.
That's an old voting system. Like, again, this was made back in the day.
That's
So,
how they
we
used to vote
don't,
when this was made.
what?
That's how they used to vote when this was made.
That was one version of it. Depending on where you were in different states, like you do a different way. Like I've lived in, I have voted in 3 different states by this point. I voted in Florida, I voted in Alabama, and I voted in Georgia. In Florida, you get basically this long piece of special paper, and you have to fill it in with a pen, like an actual pen. You have to go in and fill in, and like kind of how like. If you remember taking, we didn't do this last year, but you know like the fill in the bubble test? It's like that, where you go through and you fill in the bubbles, and if you
Oh, I
make a
remember
mistake,
that.
you have to get a whole new test, but it's with a special pen on a special paper. In Georgia, all of it is electronic, to where you go through and it's like a computer screen, and you press the button on the screen. So, that's one way of how they used to vote back in the day.
What does it ask you besides who you want to be president?
Okay, well, I mean, there's other things like House of Representatives, your Senate,
Oh,
your local
yeah.
government. So typically, we don't have one election like just for the president. Like it's not just those other people that should be voting for it all at once. Because it's a hassle to set up all those machines. So it's one of those we're doing a bunch of it all at once. Because you're not going to vote for one person at a time. It'll take forever. So also, typically you vote for other things at the same time. You have to ask your parents what else you're voting for, because depending what state you're in, there's other things you're voting on in November 4th with the presidential election. It's not just the president. There's other things that are being voted on at the same
You
time.
have to be a resident of that state to vote there.
Yes, you have to be registered to your specific county, and you can only vote in that specific county. As well, like I technically live in Harris County, so I have to make sure on November 4th that I have to vote in Harris County. I can't go cast my vote in Alabama.
Joe Biden?
That's not gonna work. What's that?
Joe Biden?
I'm not telling you.
So-
It is my own choice to decide who I want to vote for, and I'm not telling you, even though we probably all know who, potentially, but I'm not
Bernie
telling you. Okay,
So do you have, like with the voting, you have to be, what day do you go on the 4th?
it's November 4th for the presidential election.
You have to be 18 on the 4th.
There's a cutoff point before that point, because you have to be registered, so that way they know that you have to have proof saying, I live in this county, I am registering to vote in this county, because they can't say, I live in this county, and I live in this county, and I live in this county, so you can get 3 votes.
Do you
So they
know-
have to check for that type of thing. Okay, wait, raise your hand because I can't put people at once.
I was asking because, like, my birthday is November 12th, so it's like, do I have to wait till the
You're
next
gonna have to
year?
wait the whole next 4 years from now, I'm sorry.
And
Okay.
that's the same thing we have. My birthday's November 6th.
I'm sorry.
Mine's August 13th.
Nobody asked.
And 2 hours after the votes.
Well, you might have to register, I think the registration date is, I think it's October 31st. I think is the
So if
cutoff,
you're
but again, it
voting
does
November
vary a
1st.
little bit from
Took
state
a
to
vote.
state. It does vary a little bit from state, but remember, it's because you have to have proof and register saying, I'm going to vote in this county on this day. So you can't cheat and say, I'm voting in multiple counties.
I live everywhere.
Okay, alright,
I have a
finish
question.
on, okay, pass.
When was this video made?
I think it was made,
1984.
it feels like it. I have to look it up actually, I
It
don't
looks like
remember.
it. The
It
quality's
is
messed
dated, it is very dated, I'll give you that, but it's still a good song, and there's a lot of good principles.
Constitution.
Right
for
on.
the United States of America. For the United States of America.
Alright, now, here's my major complaint with it. Alright, look at your book, at the actual words of it, now listen to what they say. Let's see if I can find the beginning part.
We the people goes like this.
Alright, so follow along, you're gonna notice the same complaint that I have. So follow along your book and raise your hand as soon as you figure out what is the major issue. You
I already know.
Okay, just hang on, just wait. Let me play it so everyone else has a chance to catch up.
We the people in order to form a
Alright, so all of you caught it then, but she was first.
It's skips of the United States.
Yes,
Do I
so-
have candy?
No, I'm sorry. But that is
Yeah, we all
something
know
too. Whenever you were learning it, and I would do it, and the kids would do it too. Whenever we play it, you want to insert "We the people of the United States" in order to form a more perfect union. He says that's 4 words, and you don't want to lose those 4 words on your quiz. So So make sure, whenever you're learning the song, that you make sure that you insert of the United States really quickly into the song if you want to learn the song. If you want to learn it without the song, okay, but it's kind of harder. I say,
Alright, let's do this.
alright,
boys.
you may sing along with it now.
Let's sing.
I ain't
Everyone.
singing nothing.
We the people.
Of the United States!
Okay, I will sing with you. I
I
know
wanna
you'll
see
see
it.
it.
You don't have to see it.
We the people.
Of the United States!
Would form a more perfect union. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility.
I can't sing, so I'm not singing.
Provide for the common defense. Promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty. To ourselves and our posterity to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Alright, I'll let it play and finish it. What is it?
Why does it say?
I think they just forgot, honestly. I don't think it fit in the lyrics, so I think
I don't
they
think
left
it
it
did
out.
the lyrics.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to make it.
I think they wanted to
the way
make
they had
it,
it.
but you would think that they would
Yeah.
want it to be able to fit in a little better.
Yeah. but-
Alright, anyone have any questions about this? Because we do have to move on.
Prepositional phrase.
Alright, so, dude, yes, and it is, so make sure that you learn it. Alright, so we'll talk through more about what it means later, because I'm running out of time, but I wanna make sure we actually get into material. But make sure that you're working on it, because remember, when's this due?
Next Wednesday.
Wednesday, so you have less than a week, so make sure you are working on it, so that way you are ready to be able to write it out. It should be hopefully an easy way. Raise your hand. Yes.
My parents said so.
No, but you can find it on YouTube. It's super
Okay,
easy.
okay.
Yeah, no, that's where I got it. So if you just look up Schoolhouse Rock preamble, you can find it. It's very easy. That's the
Does
name
it have
of
100 million views?
Wait, raise your hand. What?
Does it have 100 million views?
It has a lot. I don't know if it has
I
100
watched it,
million,
maybe
but
that
it's
one.
one of those people know it. Like even a lot of public schools use it just because they know it's a good way to learn the preamble. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. So chapter 7.
No.
All right, we have to be able to keep going. So make sure you keep your focus, Chris, and Ethan, make sure you're focusing as well for it. So page 88. All right, who wants to read the quote? What time is showing in the top?
Hey.
Raise your hand. But I can't focus. Chris, that's not the quote.
The example of changing the Constitution by assembling the right minute state instead of assembling armies will be worth as much to the world as the former examples we have given.
All right, so what's he talking about?
Changing the Constitution.
All right, by wise men of the state as opposed to armies. What does that mean?
Because wise men of the state have better opinions than the armies.
Then an army?
Yeah, because the armies are going to be biased.
What are you using with an army typically?
Guns.
And you're typically
Words.
using force. So that's what he's saying, that by assembling wise men to change it as opposed to force or fighting. And that's what he's saying, is you want to be able to change the document, but you want to change it peacefully with wise people making good decisions as opposed to force and using armies to do it. Alright, so the critical period, page 88. So this time period, right after the Civil War, sorry, not Civil War, War for Independence. With the War for Independence, this becomes critical because we had the Articles of Confederation that governed us, but we were realizing this isn't necessarily a good idea. We have issues, we have problems. So this period is remembered as a critical period of American history because we have to decide how are we going to function. Are we going to function as 13 little separate kingdoms, basically, or are we going to unite us all together? So just make a note for it, somewhere around 1781 to 1789. That's remembered as a critical period over establishing how are we going to run our country. We don't have Great Britain anymore. We're not part of Great Britain anymore. How are we going to run this country? The book points out there were several changes brought about in our country. One of them was new land opportunities. Because remember, with Grenville's program, he said you couldn't go west of the Appalachian Mountains. Well, now we're no longer part of England, so we can do whatever we want in regards to that. So we can go farther west now. The next one was new social conditions. A lot of the Tories, or the loyalists to Great Britain, left during the War for Independence. Why, if you were loyal to Great Britain, would you probably leave during the War for Independence? Raise your hand. Ethan.
Because you live in a country with people that they're fighting.
Yeah, so it's probably nice to go back home by this point. Probably time to leave. Life's semi-unhealthy in the United States right now. We should go back to England. So a lot of those people left. So they're a lot of the wealthier or the aristocrat class. So because of that, it kind of evened out the American social classes. One of the next major changes was there was new state governments. Originally, the charters or the contract between the king and the colonies was what governed the colony. Well, we're not under the king anymore. So, we have to come up with a new state government. Your book points out, to continue the tradition of written documents defining powers of government, most states adopted state constitutions. Two exceptions were Rhode Island and Connecticut. So they just revised their old charters and they said, close enough, we're doing that. But most of them, they went ahead and they just redid it. Massachusetts was different. We talked about this in your homework. Anyone remember what was special about Massachusetts? Okay.
They were a haven for Catholics.
That's Maryland. But what in regards to their state constitution? What did they do in particular?
Separation of church and state.
Nope, that's Rhode Island.
Wait,
When they were under the king.
No,
Wait,
wait,
what was Massachusetts?
so what did they do? We read about this in your homework. What was special about Massachusetts? What did they do that other states said, we should copy this in the future? That was a good idea. What? Voting. So they submitted it to their people. So their state constitution was submitted to the people for ratification or voting to say, hey, here's your state constitution. Do you like it? Does it seem like a good idea? And the people either said yes or no. And so because of that, all the states after Massachusetts said, we should copy that idea. We should do that. So, all the states since then, they follow the same idea. There's one reason why, if you have a country that wants to come in as a state, they have to get approval of their own people. So like Puerto Rico, they have to say for their own people, do you want to become a state? Here's the state constitution, and now you have to submit it to Congress to see if Congress wants to let you in as a state. So there's a lot of steps to becoming part of the United States of America. Alright, your book points out the new state governments have made a common characteristics. Most of them are bicameral, but if bicameral, how many houses or parts does it have? 2. So again, not all of them. Your book points out some of them were unicameral or one house, but most of them were bicameral. They didn't like the executive governors that the king had established, so they didn't have a lot of really strong governors in the states. Now, hopefully you know with your state governments that the governor is like the president of your state. Doesn't have as much power as the president of the United States. But this idea he's in charge of your state. So they didn't like the governor having a lot of power. So typically the governors in this era were kind of weak. But your book just pointed out that they had governors. Ethan, this is my last warning. You should raise your hand. Okay.
Can the president just try to fire governor?
I do not believe so because the people vote for the governor. So the president cannot fire the governor because the people voted for him.
And he has like executive order, he can do whatever he wants.
Nope, cannot. We're gonna talk about what the president can and cannot do, but I believe
They launch nukes.
what?
They launch nukes.
That's not the same thing as firing your governor.
Like, that's the thing, like, if you think about it, as soon as you become president, you can launch a nuke anywhere in the world
You could,
without permission.
you could,
Because you and the vice president have custody to the
you could, but most people, but keep in mind you have to live with the decisions of doing that, and your own people would get very ticked off if you just decide just to nuke a random country. Your own people will probably, well, first of all, you will be fired. Now we have a technical term for firing the president, but firing the president, and then you'll probably go to jail.
You'd be
For it.
impeached, right? Or then you go to jail for war crimes, because nuclear warfare is not allowed.
Okay, so well, I mean, technically anything's allowed, but it's one in war. But it's one of those where yes, it's frowned upon to where they would probably vote to put you in jail and probably executed on it.
Question.
If you decided if you decide just to nuke a whole country and kill millions or billions of people, your own country would probably vote that you need to go at that point. Not to mention you probably would have started World War III. So lots of death and lots of problems. You would probably be executed for it. Okay.
Do they change the codes every year, every 4 years or so? After the new president?
I don't know because I'm not in charge of the project. I'm assuming it changes every couple of months actually because they don't want it to accidentally leak and get to bad people. So I'm assuming it changes every couple of weeks. Again, I'm not part of that, so I do not know, and I don't know how much public knowledge that is. Alright, we gotta keep going on. So, Articles of Confederation. So, this plan was proposed by John Dickinson. You should already recognize John Dickinson's name. Anyone remember what John Dickinson previously wrote? He wrote something else that you already have to know him for.
Let's start.
Starts with an L. Raise your hand if you know. Okay.
Is it the one with the farmer?
Yeah.
Letter from a farmer in Pennsylvania.
Yep, letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania to the inhabitants of the British colonies. So because he'd already written one. So he proposed the Articles of Confederation. Alright, a confederacy is a little bit different than how our government is today. To make a note of what a confederacy, we associate a confederacy with the Civil War. Technically, we were a confederacy at this point in history as well. To make a note of what a confederacy is whenever it's the smaller powers, they hold more authority than the central power. So basically, each state is like its own kingdom, and they can tell the central power or the federal government what to do and what it can and cannot do. So the states have more authority in a confederacy than like the president or Congress or the judicial system does. Now, we don't do that today, so it feels kind of weird, but that's the idea of a confederacy, that the central government is subordinate or less than the local governments and only has the power that they granted. Underneath the Articles of Confederation, Congress, regardless of their size, each state got one vote. We're going to talk about the problems with that one also later on. It also had certain limited powers to handle foreign affairs, borrow money, regulate the value of currency, make war and peace, raise an army, and settle disputes. One of the major problems was it couldn't tax its own people. Now the government does have to have money in order to run like the army and the navy and military, so that was a major issue for it. There were three major issues with the Articles of Confederation. Since there's three of you today, we're going to top three each one. Alright, who wants to read the first one? Chris.
And the United States had to approve a measure before it could be passed by Congress, and all 13 states had to approve for the articles to be amended. But most states were more interested in their own welfare than the welfare of the nation as a whole. They rarely agreed. To make matters worse, more than 9 states were seldom represented in Congress at any one time. Thus, it proved to be very difficult to conduct business and virtually impossible to amend the articles.
Yeah, so keep in mind, back in this time period, typically, if you were chosen as a delegate, you may or may not be getting paid for that. And so because of that, a lot of them didn't stay there all the time, because they had to go back and tend to their own crops and their own farms. So in a lot of cases, they weren't there all the time. Plus, you would have to have 9 states to approve just a change, and all 13 to amend it. That's next to impossible, because almost none of you are there at the same time. Alright, let's read the second one. Raise your hand. Alright, too late. You already raised your hand. Alright.
read a long one. The central government had no executive or judicial branches that provide strong leadership and a just court system.
Alright, we haven't officially talked about this, but you probably know. So the executive branch of our government today is the what? Someone raise your hand. If you know. Okay, Chris?
Is it the legislative?
Nope, executive branch is the what?
Judicial.
Executive is the what? Like, is it the court, Congress, or the president is the executive?
Congress.
Nope.
The court.
Nope. President. So, there was no president or executive branch in this time period. There was no president.
Judicial.
And so, judicial is the what?
Court.
Courts. So, they had Congress, an early version of Congress, but there was no judges like Supreme Court, and there was no president in this time period. Alright, number 3, Genesis.
The Confederation Congress lacked the power to tax and to perform other essential duties. Without the power to tax, Congress could not maintain national defense, nor could it provide a stable form of money.
Keep going.
Each state issued her own money and levied her own taxes on foreign imports and imports from other states. The Confederation could not protect free trade or individual property leaving the nation.
Yep, and divided. So because each state basically ran like its own little kingdom. Each state had its own currency, and each state was kind of responsible to maintain its own military because the government could not tax, so they couldn't pay to have a national army. Alright, Genesis.
Why does it refer to like the world and the United States as her?
I think it's just because just traditionally kind of how like we refer to ships as she's and hers as well. I think it's just a tradition thing. Wait, raise your hand. What?
Hurricanes.
Yeah, hurricanes are getting away from that now. I don't know why, but they just are. But it's one of those where, okay, it's just traditional sake. Alright, any questions about this? We're moving on to the Articles of Confederation. Alright, Northwest Territory. So this, in particular, is this territory up in here, but I mean, it's a good chunk of it. But it's the Northwest Territory in particular. Now, a lot of the states were claiming dibs on a lot of that territory. So your book points out that Virginia claimed the most. So Virginia's down here. Virginia's claiming here, 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 and then it finally stops. But Virginia claims a lot of territory. And so other states, they're also, now remember, why do they want the territory? Raise your hand. Chris.
The gold and other resources they can use.
Resources and land in particular, there's some gold, but not a lot. But it's the idea of, okay, they wanted the land for resources and for growing crops. What?
I said that's not to the California gold rush.
It's okay. No, you're right that there is other gold areas like gold in Oklahoma and other areas. But it's one of those to where the gold, you're right, they're showing that the major one is in California. Alright, but they wanted the land. So once Virginia said, okay, I'll recant on my claims if everybody else recants on theirs, and then we'll evenly divide it up. The other state said, well, if you're willing to give up your claim, you have the most, okay, we'll all back down from it. So once Virginia backed up, everyone else said, Okay, we'll let the government decide what to do with the land. Okay.
So basically, after we broke away from Britain, and you could expand, everyone basically just went out and started claiming pieces of land.
Basically, yeah, they wanted to divot for that because people understood if you own land, that was resources, and so they were going dibs, 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 dibs as they went across, trying to claim it as much as possible. Now again, we still do that today to a minor extent, but we've just run out of land in the world to kind of dib. There's not a whole lot of dibbing left to do. Yeah, we're not there yet, thankfully. Alright, so there's two kind of important pieces of documents for it. So the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. You make a note of what each one did. So I like this picture. Your book has a similar version, but it's the idea of the Land Ordinance of 1785. You make a note for this one because they are so similar. Don't just learn it as Land Ordinance. So Land Ordinance of 1785. This one divided the town into townships, or basically squares. It created a giant kind of checkerboard pattern for it, saying here's each section for it. Okay, quick question.
If Michigan wasn't a thing, does that mean Lake Michigan was just a lake?
They probably named it something, but they probably changed the name later. Like, if you know, what's the tallest mountain in North America?
The Appalachians.
North America, all of it.
It's up in Alaska. Oh, is it, what's start with?
Mount, technically. I'm checking to see because there's an old name and a new name.
Mount what?
Okay, well, just a
Mount
second.
Everest?
It's in Asia!
Oh.
Alright, Ethan, you were
It starts with the what?
It starts, well, one of them answers your question. It starts with an M if you're going off the old name, and then the new name starts with D.
McKinley?
McKinley is the only one. Now, keep in mind, we switched back the name to Mount Denali because that's what the original Native American people group called it. And then a lot of Europeans went over and said, nope, we're going to change it. And then we changed our minds, but I said, no, we should go back to the original name. So, I mean, names for stuff changes. So they probably had a name for it. Might not have been Lake Michigan, but they probably called it something, and then they tried to rename it later.
Lake again.
I just don't remember what it is. Alright, so, just note for this one. So, one section of each township was reserved for public education, 4 sections were reserved for the federal government, and the remaining sections were to be sold at public auction for no less than $1 per acre. That's a steal, even by today's standards. That's really good. But I mean, money was worth slightly different back then. But keep in mind, so you would have 4 pieces that were reserved for the federal government, for like federal buildings, like courthouses, postal services. So again, they're not thinking about postal service quite yet, but it's the idea of, okay, we have government buildings. Why do you think typically one of the center ones was reserved for education? Jesus.
So everyone could go to the middle.
Yeah, so if they picked like a corner, poor kids that live down here, they gotta go all the way across. So they said, okay, one of these center ones is going to be the education one. So like, everyone in this section can at least get to the education building. It should be easier for the children to get there. So that was the idea behind it. But the major thing for this one was that it divided up the land into these townships. Township sections are actually still used today. If you know someone that lives up in this area, a lot of their land deeds still reference their township number, saying that this is the section of land that they purchased from the federal government way back, and just their kids, and they are the descendants of the original owners of the land. So it's kind of interesting how we still use this to a smaller extent today. Alright, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 was to say how you have people move into the land. Basically, the Founding Fathers did not want what happens in the Wild West with lawfulness to happen over here. Richmond? Yes.
Wildfires.
Nope. With the idea of people just going out, and you probably know what the Wild West was like with like a lot of your movies and what you typically see, how it was like gunslingers and stuff like that. They didn't want things like that in the Northwest Territory. So they were saying, okay, as you have people move into a territory, how do we protect them as they move into it? So how do we have families move in and not keep them from getting killed or murdered? How do we establish this?
Is that true?
With what?
In the West?
There's a lot of it, yeah, no, because some movies they exaggerate. But there was a lot of lawlessness in the West just because people are moving out and there's not really a lot of law, there's not really policemen out West. So it's one of those, you had to bring a gun with you because it might be you versus the bandits.
There's police in other places?
Not here yet. Police don't come around until the
So you
1900s.
can murder someone and not going to trouble.
If people caught you, you would go to jail. They would have different types of authorities, but it wasn't like an armed policeman. That type of occupation comes later. Alright, so make a note though that the governor and judges would be assigned to a territory, so a governor and 3 judges, all appointed by Congress, whenever you had 5,000 free adult males, because again, you have to be a freeman, and you have to be a male, because ladies cannot vote in this time period. The voters, and they would be permitted to elect a representative assembly who would assist in governing the territory. Once you got to 60,000 people, it could be admitted as a free and equal state. Now, your book also points out that part of the rules for it was that the Northwest Territory, it was to be divided up into no less than 3 and no more than 5 states. Why do you think they're putting a limit on like the numbers for it?
So there actually is enough people that they can become states.
Not quite. Good idea, but not quite. Alright, anyone else think you know?
Enough people for what?
Why do you think they're saying, okay, in this Northwest Territory, we want no more than 5 states out of it, and we want no less than 3? Why are they putting
They
it
didn't
down?
want to have just a bunch of little states or a bunch of big states.
Good job. So basically, they don't want what kind of happens to Texas being one massive state. They were saying, okay, we don't want this. We want to make sure that this is evenly divided up with land-wise in regards to other states. So no less than 3 states. We don't want 2 massive states in this section. And we don't want no more than 5 states. We don't want a bunch of itty-bitty states. We need to try to even this out a little bit. So that's what they're saying. So again, we see this in other areas of the country later on. Where is it?
That's in Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky's turning into a state in this time period. Alright, so your book points out as well that one of the important things was a state that was carved out of the Northwest Territory, it would come on equal footing as the original 13s. There was an idea that the original 13 states should have more power or more authority because they thought that they worked for independence and the new states didn't. They quickly nixed that idea because they said that's not fair. If you have a state come into it, it should be on equal footing. It shouldn't be like Massachusetts is more important because battles were fought there. No, everyone's on equal footing. It doesn't matter when you come in. Everyone's on the same playing field in regards to voting. Okay, what's your question, Joseph?
So, even before this, with all these 13 colonies, what was going on the other side of the state, like the other side of the United States?
Native Americans mainly.
So
I mean, keep in mind,
just-
Spanish are over there a little bit. And I mean, there's some explorers, but there's not a whole lot of anything really happening at this time
Stuff
period.
that one we don't worry about. Like,
Yeah, I mean, Native Americans are over there, and sorry, Native Americans, you just keep being pushed farther and farther west across the country, and that's unfortunate, and that was wrong. But it's one of those where it's happening. Okay, but it's kind of getting started in this area. Alright, but that's the reason why we went about, because we're not talking about the nation as a whole yet. And since Spain controls a lot of that section at this time period, and then France later, we just don't learn about US history all that much. Alright, so your book points out another wise provision of the ordinance called for complete religious freedom. They're realizing now Rhode Island had it right, and we should all have complete religious freedom, freedom of speech, trial by jury. They actually prohibited slavery up in this section. A lot of the founding fathers are realizing allowing slavery to begin with was not a good idea. We just try to slowly get this out of here. So they are saying up here, at least in this section, no slavery. We're going to talk about the South. We're going to talk about the southern states and why they wanted it in particular. But up here, they're saying no slavery. We need to try to slowly get rid of this. We're realizing this wasn't a good idea. They also encouraged education, and it called for fair treatment of the Native Americans. Now, they're realizing a lot of Native Americans are being taken advantage of, which is sad and unfortunate. So they're saying you have to treat them fair. Unfortunately, the Native Americans get kind of a bum deal throughout a lot of the United States history, and that's sad and that's unfortunate. We need to learn from it so we don't do this type of thing again. Alright, I'm gonna have any questions about Northwest Territory. We'll move on and talk about Shays Rebellion.
Are actual like American Indians like almost extinct?
No, there's actually a whole bunch of them. There's more alive today, they think, than there were alive whenever Christopher Columbus discovered America, because a lot of them would have tribal warfare and fight each other, and so there was a lot of problems with the Native Americans back in that day, like the Aztecs with human sacrifice. So they think there's more alive, I mean, there's more people alive today
Is
than
there
there was
any
back then.
reservations in Georgia?
I don't think in Georgia. They're more out west being reservations. But I mean, Indians don't live just on the reservations. Like I knew a family, she was, I think, the mom was, I think 1/8 Indian. It was either her, it was either her parents or her grandparents were Native Americans. I can't remember which one it was.
Is white a lot?
Oh, it's a decent chunk, because remember, if you're half, that's 50%. So if you go down the next one, it's 25%. And so 1/4 means it was your grandparents. I think she was 4th, because it was her grandparents were like full-blooded Native Americans. So I mean, it gets smaller and smaller chunks the further down you get.
33% then?
I think the next one, well,
Because there'd be 100, then it would go to 50, then it go to 33.
I think it's 20, because remember, it gets divided in half. So it's 50, then half of 25, half of 50 is 25. Okay.
There's still people who like actually live like that, like they still live in TVs?
They do it more for like cultural, but it's one of those where, okay, I mean, I guess if you really wanted to on the Indian Reservation, like, you probably have seen, I see it because I drive on I-65 a lot, but the Wind Creek Reservation, okay, that's a major Indian. Now, unfortunately, they have voted to allow casinos onto their property, which is why we associate a lot of casinos and hotels with Indian reservations. Not all of them. That's the reason why, is because they voted to allow the casino into the area. Typically, it's how that happens. You can't just build a casino in an area. Again, it does vary from state to state. Like in Louisiana, technically, we do not allow casinos on land in Louisiana. But there's the Mississippi River in Louisiana. And that is a loophole that they have figured out that no, the casino's not on land, it's on water. And so that's how people got away with having casinos in certain sections. In certain sections of Louisiana. That is literally what they did. They built basically super nice, looks kind of like a cruise liner, but it's not, it's a casino. Okay.
I'm sorry about that. It's like on boats, I guess?
Yep, it's on a boat on the Mississippi River. So it's one of those, it's one of those, it's a loophole. It's not on land, it's on water. And so they have found loopholes that way for it. Okay, but yeah, getting back into this now. So, pressing national problems. Your book points out there were several issues with our country coming out as a new nation. Other countries didn't really respect us as a nation. Now, England is being petty, because England is upset that they lost the war, and so they are just being petty and malicious in a lot of cases for it. They are refusing to abandon their forts in the United States. They're just chilling out in their forts and being annoying. So they're staying in American territory, and we can't make them get out because we don't have our own army to force them out anymore. So England's being petty in that regard. They're also not trading with us, trying to hurt our economy, and they're trying to send over cheap goods, messing with the merchants and trying to sell things over here. They're hurting the manufacturing, so they're being petty is what they're doing. Okay, good question.
Is that what leads to the War of 1812?
Part of it is because the British have a really hard time seeing us as a whole nation. They just see us as, oh, it's the rebel colonies again. And so that's part of the reason why we have issues through a lot of this time period. And that's kind of the reason why we have to go back to war with them again. After that war, it kind of fixes everything to where England says, okay, I think I'm over it now. But it's getting up to that point. So your book points out Spain would also not really treat us right. France, even though France was a major ally, France understood you are broke, and we don't really want to trade with you right now because you are broke. And so they were trying to avoid this well. So a lot of nations of the world worked on the best terms with us for it. Alright, to make matters worse, our government, they could not pay back people that had bought a bond. Does anyone know what a bond is, like stocks and bonds? Your book does not tell you about this yet. Okay, then we know what a bond is though. Okay.
Pretty much you buy a share into a company.
Okay, that's stocks.
Oh, bond. Does that mean kind of like a loan, right?
Yeah, actually. It's the idea of if you buy a $20 bond from the government, let's use that as an example. So you're basically giving or loaning the government $20. The government says, here's a piece of paper that says you loaned us $20. We will pay it back and we'll pay you interest or extra money for it.
Federal things, so.
Yeah, occasionally. Now keep in mind we don't do it a whole lot because we're not at war right now, so we don't have bonds with the government right now for it. So, because of this though, the government, they could not pay back their bonds because the government is broke in this time period. So they couldn't redeem back their bonds, so they couldn't pay back the people. So it's having people who were basically in debt and they couldn't get money to pay for it. Shays Rebellion happened. Now remember, this is not Bacon's Rebellion, this is Shays Rebellion. These were farmers, now keep in mind, these are farmers that had left their crops and their farms to go fight in the War for Independence. So they had lost money. Well, they had to pay back various debts, but they couldn't because they're broke, because they were farmers and they were trying to pay back the debt after they had already gone and fought in the War for Independence. So because of this, many of the farms, they were closed or foreclosed on, where the state took their farms back as property. Since property's worth something, they were being taken back. So the farmers are saying, this isn't fair. We're having our farms taken away, our livelihood to pay back the debt, but we have no way to pay back the debt ourselves. The government's not paying us for our service, and the service militia. This is a bum deal all around. So we'll talk about how this is in the Shays Rebellion some much the other time. Alright, homework for tonight. Read pages 92 through 97. 92 through 97. Answer on page 97, questions 1 through 9. So on page 97, questions 1 through 9. Don't forget you have to choose Federalist paper by tomorrow. So choose which one you want to do. I would suggest reading them both. And then both, so that way we're ready for it. Alright, so thinking back over it. Alright. Alright, what was the state that submitted its constitution to its own people to ratify? Raise your hand if you know. Raise your hand. Massachusetts. Good job. Alright, which one? The land ordinance of 1785 or the Northwest ordinance of 1787 said how many states could be carved out of that territory?
87.
It was the Northwest ordinance of 1787. Good job. What term refers to a two-house legislature? Ethan.
Okay.
Good job. Which type of government is it whenever the central government is subordinate to local governments? Confederacy. Bye, Jamie, Quentin, and Brecken.